Now, a Free Market News ETV special presentation.
Hi, welcome to the website. It's very nice to have you clicking on here. You're obviously concerned about government, which is why you've tuned in. Well, there's a word much worse than communism, socialism, fascism. The word is collectivism. You're going to learn about that word and how it disrupts a lot of things and how it's in control all over the place. Our guest is Edward Griffin, and Ed's website is freedomforceinternational.org, and Ed is a regular contributor here at Free Market News. Ed, very good to have you on again.
Thank you very much, John.
Collectivism.
Yeah, this is kind of a dictionary game, isn't it? Because that word collectivism, although it's certainly in the dictionary, and it was used quite a bit in historical documents, current history documents of a century ago, it's almost vacant from the modern vocabulary. Collectivism, as you just said in your introduction, is the underlying general ideology that is common to so many of the totalitarian systems of modern times. Communism, fascism, Nazism, all three of those have as their underpinning certain common elements to an ideology that really, they're the only things that you should be looking at. The names communism, fascism, Nazism, so forth, are just labels, but they don't describe anything. Collectivism is what we're talking about. So what is collectivism? We don't have time for all of it, but we've been able to identify certain common components. One of them is the idea that the group is more important than the individual, and that the individual, if necessary, must be sacrificed for the greater good of the greater number. Now, as I've said many times, that is something that I learned in school, and I thought it made a lot of sense at that time, because I was told that we were living in a democracy, and in a democracy, isn't it true that 51% of the vote should rule? And that all made sense to me at the time. But forgive me if I repeat myself here for your listeners that may have heard this before, but for those who have just tuned in, this is an important piece of information. A democracy, a pure democracy, is not a good idea. As our founding fathers clearly stated when they created this country, they discussed the merits and demerits of a democracy, and to a man, they said, we do not want a democracy for this country. We want a republic. And they were very emphatic on that. Now that's strange to the modern reader, because don't we have a democracy?
Yes, don't we have a democracy?
Isn't a democracy a good thing?
Good
you know?
thing.
Yeah. Well, let's just analyze for a minute. A democracy is, pure democracy is based on the concept of majority rule. And that's the end of it. And you say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, there could be plenty wrong with that. And the best example I can think of is a lynch mob. Now, majority rule there. There's only one dissenting vote, and he's at the end of the rope.
Yes.
Well, a thinker would say, well, wait a minute, we better go back over this. So you come quickly to the decision that the majority should rule, okay, but within certain limitations, not to the extent of denying the rights of the individual or a minority. That should be something that even the majority should not be allowed to do. Because we know from history, and our founding fathers knew from history, that a mob can be a very vicious thing. And it's possible for a demagogue to whip up the passions of a mob and actually sway the majority in moments that would be very destructive of the rights of individuals or minorities. And that's why they wrote the Constitution, which, when you analyze it in general, was a series of limitations on what the majority can do.
Now, if we had a pure democracy, then a mob vote could take place and say, well, people over the age of 72 are a burden. Let us legally put them to sleep because it would be better for the economy as a whole. And we could vote this type of thing in.
Absolutely. And all they have to do is claim that their action is for the greater good of the greater number, you see. Now, that's one of the foundations of collectivism. Now, the individualist, on the other hand, and that's the other side of the debate, individualists versus collectivists. The individualist looks at society and says, wait a minute, what is this thing called group? Where is a group? Can you point to a group? Can you see a group? And you can't. You can only see individuals. The word group is an abstraction. It's a word concept. It's an image in the mind of something that doesn't really exist, except to the extent that individuals exist. It's like the word forest. There's no such thing as a forest. There are only trees.
Sure.
You can see trees, but you cannot see forests. So it's an abstraction. When you then, therefore, base a political philosophy on an abstraction, and you say that this abstraction has rights that are greater than the individual, you've made a huge mistake, because what you're doing is you're sacrificing this so-called group anyway, but you're doing it one person at a time. And the irony of it is that the leaders of this so-called democracy, or this concept of collectivism, of the superiority of the group, the leaders are making the decisions of what is best for the greater number. They're the ones who are saying that we're going to have to get rid of everybody over 70, or everybody over 60, or everybody we don't like, because we don't like the way they think. Mm-hmm. Maybe they've got hate crimes or something, or maybe they don't vote Republican, or they don't vote Democrat. We don't like them for some reason, and it's for the greater good of society. We're just going to have to put them in jail or possibly eliminate them. So that's one of the tenets of collectivism, and the individualist says, no, you can't do that. The rights of the individual and the minority must be preserved. Well, there are other things we could talk about. Let's take one more example just to nail this down. Collectivists and individualists generally agree as to what should be done in society. They both want good things for their fellow man, for their families, and for the world. They want peace, security, justice. They want health. They want freedom. Well, I'm not so sure about the collectivist, because he's willing to trade freedom for some of these other things. But they all want good things. Where they differ is how to bring them about.